Great pleasure this morning to have one of the true luminaries of the Philadelphia cluster with us today, and that's Bruce Levine, who wears a number of hats. And Bruce, maybe the best place to start is to give us a quick look at the many roles that you play here in Philadelphia.
Hi, Joe. Thanks for having me and for the conversation. So I am the Barbara and Edward Netter Professor in Cancer Gene Therapy at Penn, the current president of the International Society for Cell and Gene Therapy, and a co-founder of Community Therapeutics, which is a spin-out of Penn.
So I wonder how you have any time to get any sleep in with all the roles and responsibilities you have. Bruce,
well, that happens. Look, it's an exciting time, and look forward to discussing how things have evolved, but it gives me a view of what's happening not only at Penn, but the region, nationally and globally.
It is an exciting time. And Bruce, one of the things that I've marveled at is really how you came to the position that you're in. As we discussed, it's almost like you're in the family business.
Yeah, well, I think I was exposed to science at an early age. My mother's a retired nurse and my father's a retired scientist. He had a lab at the Worcester Institute, and I started working there not in his lab, but in a colleague's lab, Vince Christofalo's lab, when I was in high school, and continued during undergraduate years. And after graduating from Penn, took a job as a technician at Children's Hospital. So yeah, I've been at Worcester, CHOP, and Penn throughout my careers, and sometimes twice.
And so at some point, your path connected with Carl June. Let's talk about that for a quick sec.
Sure. So I had gone to grad school at Johns Hopkins in the Department of Immunology and Infectious Diseases. And I was doing my thesis work in a laboratory in the hospital directed by Alan Hess. And I was researching T cells and how T cells come to know what to do, how they see foreign substances and antigens, how they receive their signals. And I was reading papers by a guy named Carl June, and I applied to his laboratory, among others, for a postdoctoral fellowship. And so he accepted me into his lab. I started there in early 1992 and did some research on signaling and T cells and hematopoietic stem cells. And after a couple of years, he asked me, how would I like to start a lab that grows T cells for adoptive immunotherapy clinical trials? And having been exposed to immunology, to translational medicine at Children's Hospital and at Johns Hopkins Hospital, that was exactly what I wanted to do.
And what a great collaboration it's been. And so we were very fortunate that you both ended up back here in Philadelphia.
Yeah, so I should add a little bit about how that happened. So I started this lab that we call the Clinical Cell and Vaccine Production Facility at the Naval Hospital in Bethesda. And the idea behind the clinical trial was to grow T cells from HIV positive subjects, grow them up in the lab in large numbers, and reinfuse them to bolster their immune system. Well, we did that in 10 patients and showed that we successfully raised their CD4 T cell counts, their immune function. And if you think of that concept of bolstering immunity, well, it has applications in cancer, but the Department of Defense, they do excellent research in infectious disease going back to yellow fever, malaria, HIV, but they don't do cancer research. And Carl had been recruited a number of places around the country, and then an opportunity came up at Penn. And he told me about that. And I said, well, you're not going to have to recruit me back up to Philadelphia. Let me tell you about why that's a great place to be. So it was more like reverse recruiting. He didn't have to convince me to come back.
Well, what a fantastic story! And since then, you both have really created significant breakthroughs. Perhaps we can spend a minute talking about the continued development of the work that you were doing and how it's manifested, and then we can talk a little bit about the Philadelphia cluster itself.
Yeah, sure, Joe. So I want to make the point that in the era that I first was exposed to research, when my father had a lab, um, each lab had some postdocs, grad students, technicians, and they would collaborate down the hallway. And this was doing basic research. But when you're doing translational research, you're really dependent on building a team, in fact, building teams of teams. And so my role when we moved up to Penn in 1999 was to start this manufacturing facility that did development, manufacturing, and testing of cell and gene therapies. Carl had a research lab. Our collaborators had research labs. We had labs and developed labs that did correlative analysis on samples from patients enrolled in the clinical trial. We had principal investigators, clinicians like David Porter, Steve Schuster, Steve Grupp, many others over the past 21 years that have been invested in cell and gene therapy. We have expertise in regulatory science. And so you have to bring all of these teams together, have them working together at a very high level in order to make progress in translating cell and gene therapies to the clinic.
So I understand that the coining of Silicon Valley just sort of popped out of your mouth at one point. Um,
Well, I'd like to tell you that that was a product of some deep thought, but the truth of the matter is, in my role, I had been asked to meet with patients and families of patients and give them a tour of our lab, explain to them the technology behind how we grow T cells and how we manufacture and test these new therapies. And there was one family that came by, and I was talking to them in my office, and this was about 10 years ago, maybe it was 7 years ago, trying to explain to them what we're trying to build in Philadelphia with these new therapies and companies and alliances. And it just popped out, Joe. Silicon Valley, cells around my mind all day, every day, and I didn't think much of it. And then I heard that John Epstein, our chief scientific officer, our dean, and Larry Jameson and Kevin Mahoney, who's now CEO, begun to use this, and then it was taken up by Life Sciences PA and used in an advertising campaign at the JP Morgan meetings. And so Carl June was out there to give a talk, and he had some meetings. He was in the taxi going from the airport to his hotel, and this ad for Silicon Valley came on the little TV screen in the cabin. So he took a picture and sent it to me, and that's the first time I heard that someone else was actually paying attention to it.
well, it's quite a label that you've coined, and let's talk a little bit about what that means. How is Philadelphia standing as a cluster? And let's talk a little also about the vision that you had for what you saw that we were going to accomplish here in Philadelphia. Because, Bruce, my sense is in the 7 or so years that have transpired, things have come a long way.
Yeah, Joe, I think it's representative of the academic to industry collaboration. We can do research on all kinds of interesting aspects of immunology, cell therapy, gene therapy, serious diseases that can be treated. But if we don't translate those to clinical trials, and then if we don't take that further and translate to advanced clinical trials and commercialization, we're doing research that can inform us. It's interesting, but we really want to have an impact on human health. And we have a legacy of innovation in Philadelphia. America's first scientist, Benjamin Franklin, started the University of Pennsylvania. We have been known as the center of eds and meds. Now we're the center of new eds and new meds. The idea was to get everyone together thinking about this, and then, like we don't do enough in Philadelphia, telling others about it. I think we have 30, 35 cell and gene companies in the Philadelphia area. We're building something special in all aspects of cell and gene therapy and contract manufacturing, and we have a true technology cluster that we can build on.
So, Bruce, I think about Philadelphia as a leader in cell and gene therapy, if not the leader. I'm curious how you see it.
Well, I think we are at the top tier of cell and gene therapy clusters worldwide. When I used to travel 8 months ago, I put on a lot of miles around the world. I've been on many continents speaking to people about cell and gene therapy and what we're doing. And people know Philadelphia. People know what Penn is doing in cell and gene therapy and the other institutions here. We have 2 FDA first in cell and gene therapy. We have Luxturna and Kymriah that came out of CHOP and Penn. People know it. They want to be here. They want to be part of the team. And importantly, it's not only the innovation, but the livability of this city, the collaboration. And let me just say something about the environment at Penn. I'm a Penn undergrad. Of course, I'm biased as an alumnus, but you can't do these advances without a collaborative and fertile environment. And we have that at Penn. It's not that case at other centers. There are silos built up. You don't have always the ability to work on these interesting, exciting, and important scientific and clinical questions in an environment as collaborative as we have here in Philadelphia. And I think that's also in part the culture of the city, to be collaborative and innovative at the same time.
You know, to that point, we've recently seen 2 larger companies relocate themselves to Philadelphia, one Amicus and the other Iovance. Do you see that as a growing trend, and we're going to see a lot more of that in the future because of the desire to be in the environment of this collaborative gene and cell therapy culture?
Yeah, I see that as a growing trend for a number of reasons. We have the intellectual capital here. We have the environment, the culture, and importantly, we have real estate that is affordable, meaning real estate for the companies, but also for the people who come to work here. They can have a very good quality of life where some other places that have very expensive cost of living and other issues don't have that capability. Look, I think there are great things ahead, and we're expanding in terms of our hiring at Penn and our hiring at Community, and I know other centers are hiring because I get the emails, do you know someone for this position? So it's a great place to be.
And it does appear to me that the proliferation of companies that are spinning out of the research, the institutional research environment continues to grow year over year, which to my eye seems to be a great prognosis for the future. How are you seeing that as you're watching that firsthand?
Yeah, look, I am seeing the growth. I'll tell you the one thing that worries me is what a bottleneck is the search for talent. And because the field has expanded so quickly, there's a great search for talent at all levels, from people who are doing the work in the labs to managers to directors to VPs and C-suite. And I'll tell you that we've been fortunate to recruit people at all levels here, but we do have to work not only in this region, but in collaboration with other regions at building programs for workforce education and training.
Well, Bruce, you know, that also, in a sense, is an exciting message, because that means there's opportunity. There's big opportunity for people who can go out and get the training and come participate here in Philadelphia. So on the one hand, we have a pinch point, but there's also something exciting about it, because there is a path for a lot of people to advance themselves.
There is, and I think back to when I was an undergrad and I was majoring in biology. I knew I didn't want to go to medical school. I asked a few of my professors, what do you see the up and coming field of the next 20 or 30 years? And I got the answer back, immunology. So if I give the advice to those people thinking about where they want to be in 10, 20, 30 years, cell and gene therapy, immunology is the place to be in Philadelphia.
Well, we couldn't agree more, and there's so much to talk about with you. We could go on for a long time, Bruce. I know we want to have you back and talk maybe in 6 months or a year and look at the trajectory and how things have grown. So thank you, and thank you for the important role that you've played in growing the Philadelphia cluster. We are so proud to be part of it, and so excited about the work that's going on at Penn and the work that all of your colleagues are doing. So thank you.
Thanks, Joe. It's the product of the great teams that we work with.